You see, before that conversation, many people followed him for his material things. Some of people in Jerusalem. And the towns around, as long as he could give them bread, they come in.
Come on now.
And when he began to preach and say some hard things, the Bible says, many turned back and they walked with him no longer. You know your friends when they will endure with you through the hard things.
Amen.
There are people who will hang with you as long as you say easy things and smooth things to please them. They will hang with you as long as you are not rocking the boat. They will hang with you as long as you're not ruffling feathers. They will hang with you. But the minute you begin to rock the boat and ruffle feathers, you will know who are your true friends. Now Jesus sees who are his friends. Many turn back and they walk with him no longer. But I will tell you this as well, Real friends speak truth to power to each other.
That's right. Amen. That's right.
A real friend will tell you when you mess up.
That's right. Sure. That's a friend. Come on.
There are people who will see you messing up and they wouldn't say a word. They're not your friends.
Right.
They're not your friends.
That's right.
And in the family, that ought to be the closest tie. In the earthly circle, you've got to be able to tell people the real hard facts about themselves. But Jesus could not say it in Jerusalem because he knew that they were not his friends. They had rejected him. The rejection was full and complete. Therefore, he gathered up his small band of disciples and retreated to a little Gentile town in Caesarea Philippi, a town that was a center for the worship of Pan, previously of the Canaanite Baal. Here he goes into a place where they worship Baal to talk about Jerusalem. A conversation that he could not have in Jerusalem about Jerusalem. Which now brings me to one of 2 points I'm going to make and then take my seat. The first point is the word on the street. Jesus was interested in the opinion poll. There's nothing new under the sun. This past week, our president gave a State of the Union address. And then he wanted to know what people think. And he gave all good answers to say, excellent, great. Everything he gave, you had to answer, but if you give an answer, it had to be something good. But Jesus Christ wanted to know what you really think. Whether it was good or whether it was bad, he wanted to know what's on your heart, what's in your mind concerning him. And so he turns to his disciples in Matthew chapter 16. And verse number 13, he says to his disciples, this conversation is not happening in Jerusalem, it's happening in Caesarea Philippi, outside of Jerusalem, a little Gentile town. He's talking about Jerusalem in a Gentile community. He says to them, who do people say that I am? What's the word on the street? Hey. Jesus was street smart. He was not ignorant as to what was going on around him. He was street smart. He was savvy about all that's happening around him. Nobody was able to catch him by surprise. And even though he asked his disciples, he knew, but he was just testing to see if they knew what people were saying about him and about them. Hello, somebody. Because if they talk about Jesus Christ, they're going to talk about you too. And so you ought to know what people are saying about me, because what they're saying about me, they're also saying about you.
Yes,
Come on.
So he says, what's the word on the street? What's the word on the ground? What are people saying? Again, keep in mind, as I said, he had already been rejected. He came and he cleansed the temple. And now he leaves and he goes out into Caesarea. And the people have been talking him bad. Interestingly, the disciples were aware of the word of the street. God's people ought to be aware of the word on the street.
Come on now.
Jesus Christ did not live in a bubble.
No, sir.
His disciples were not living in a bubble.
No, sir.
They knew what was going on around them. And in these days of Earth's history, in which we are living as the people of God, we ought to know what's going on around us. That's how we will be ready for the events of the last days, and how we will help others to be ready for the events of the last days. We ought to know. As we study the word of God, and even as we look at the news, we ought to know. So the disciples knew the word on the street. As Jesus knew, so they say, well, there's conjecture out there of some people who believe that you are John the Baptist.
Come on.
Then there's another circle, an opinion poll out there that say that you are Elias, you are Elijah. There is another opinion poll out there that says that you are Jeremiah. And yet there's still the undecided people who don't adhere to any one of the three polls, John the Baptist, Elijah, or Jeremiah. They just simply feel that you are just one of the prophets came back from the dead. No, it's interesting, and if I had a time, I could preach on all of those, because for all of the opinion polls that people had out there, they were seeing in Jesus traits of the people that they said he looked like. For instance, Jeremiah was the weeping prophet who suffered a whole lot. Was placed in a dungeon, was rejected. And so they saw that Jesus Christ was suffering and will suffer and will have to go through a whole lot, will cry. So they saw him as being Jeremiah. Elias was one who was supposed to come and say a lot of hard things and turn the hearts of fathers to children and husband and wife. And he was saying those things. So some people say, well, this has to be John the Baptist. And then we have, Elias. And then we have John the Baptist, who was just living out there. John the Baptist had no house to live in. He had no car, no chariot. He was living out there in the wilds. And so Jesus Christ is homeless. So maybe he's John the Baptist. That's the opinion poll. So Elias, Jeremiah, John the Baptist. And so Jesus Christ knew the word on the street, and his disciples also knew the word on the street concerning him. I want to say to us, my dear brothers and sisters, We've got to know the word that's going on around us. That's how we will be able to help people with the right word that they need to hear. Would somebody say amen? If you don't know what they think, if you don't know what they believe, you will not be able to help to correct their faulty thinking and to give them the pure and unadulterated word of God.